Good morning, and welcome to the 167th Landon Lecture on Public Affairs. The Landon Lectures began in 1966 by the late Governor Alfred Landon and the late K-State President James McCain. The goal of the Landon Lectures is to bring the most prominent thought leaders to Kansas State University to discuss the pressing issues of the day. We are very pleased today to welcome Mr. Jay Johnson to the Landon podium to join 166 predecessors sharing their thoughts and opinions on important public issues. At this time, I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce some of our key campus leadership. First, Dr. Jackie Hartman, Chairperson of the Landon Lecture Series and Chief of Staff in the Office of the President. Thank you. And let's hold our applause because I'm going to go through a whole list of folks. So we do want to give Jay plenty of time to speak. So Dr. Fred Guzak, President of the Faculty Senate, Professor of Marketing at K-State Salina. Fred. Carrie Jennings, President of the University Support Staff Senate. Andrew Hertig, K-State Student Body President and Senior in Accounting. Let's give a big round of applause to our campus leadership. Thank you. We certainly have a number of distinguished guests today in attendance, and I'd like to again ask folks to hold their applause as I introduce each of these individuals. To begin with, Senator Pat Roberts and his wife Frankie. Pat and Frankie, thank you. Yeah, we can applaud. Okay, come on. Kansas Lieutenant Governor Jeff Collier. Jeff, thank you for being here today. We appreciate it. Chair of the Kansas Board of Regents, Kenny Welk, and my boss. Kenny, thank you for being here. State Representative representing Manhattan, Tom Phillips. Tom, thank you for being here as well. And really distinguished company today. You don't have one K-State president, you have two. Dr. John Weefald, President Emeritus of K-State, and his wife Ruth Ann. John and Ruth Ann, please. Thank you. Mr. Jay Johnson was sworn in on December 23, 2013 as the 4th Secretary of Homeland Security. Before joining the Department of Homeland Security, he served as a General Counsel for the Department of Defense, where he was part of the senior management team and led the more than 10,000 military and civilian lawyers across the department. In this role, he oversaw the development of the legal aspects of many of the nation's counterterrorism policies, spearheaded reforms to the military commission systems at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, and co-authored the 250-page report that paved the way for the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell law in 2010. Secretary Johnson is visiting K-State today to break ground for the NBAF, the National Bio-Agro-Defense Facility. NBAF will be the nation's premier foreign animal disease research lab, helping to keep the U.S. homeland secure and protect our nation's food supply. Please give a big K-State welcome to Mr. Jay Johnson. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Please have a seat. That was a really warm welcome. I am impressed that here at Kansas State, after the school year is out, on a Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock, you're able to fill this auditorium. That's really remarkable. Thank you for the wonderful invitation to be here. I, too, want to acknowledge the distinguished visitors, the distinguished public officials here, most of all Senator Pat Roberts, who has been a stalwart champion for the state of Kansas and for national security and homeland security. Thank you for your service, sir. I also want to acknowledge the members of the United States Army who are here from Fort Riley and other places. I was chatting with a few of them before my remarks here today. Members of the Army, please stand, and of the Armed Forces, please stand and be recognized. I'm proud of the fact that in the Department of Homeland Security we've got so many veterans of our armed forces, two of whom are with me here today. They are two of my public affairs officers, retired Lieutenant Colonel Tanya Bradshaw and retired Lieutenant Colonel Todd Brazil. Please stand. Stand up. Where's Todd? Todd is, now, I got to talk a little bit about Todd. Todd is dressed in blue jeans today. There is life after the United States Army in civilian clothes. Todd is dressed in blue jeans. The reason he's dressed in blue jeans today is because he has a really nice suit that is somewhere in checked luggage between O'Hare and Kansas City. He would want you to know that. Again, thank you for the invitation to be here. I am truly impressed with the list of those who have preceded me in this lecture series, to include Presidents Carter and Reagan, both Presidents Bush, Vice President Mondale, Tom Donilon, Nelson Rockefeller. I just finished reading Richard Norton Smith's book about Nelson Rockefeller, my former boss, and Kansan, Secretary of Defense Bob Gates, Colin Powell, Leslie Stahl, Bob Dole, Robert and Ted Kennedy, Pat Moynihan, and Barry Goldwater, and Shirley Temple and Alf Landon. I've got to tell a story. Senator Roberts will appreciate this story. 1978, I was a summer intern for the United States Senate. I was 20 years old, rising senior in college. I was working for Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, my senator from New York. And one day, I was with his driver in the Dirksen Senate office building during the summer of 1978, and his driver said to me, "Jay, let's take a ride on the senator's only elevator. They're gone. They're not around. They're in recess." And I said, "Are you sure?" "Yes, I am positive. They are gone. Moynihan is nowhere near." So we walked up to the elevator. We pushed the button. I'm standing there. The door is open, and in front of me is Barry Goldwater. Nose to nose with Barry Goldwater, and I swear to goodness, he looked straight at me without batting an eye and said, "Hello, Senator." Just kept right on walking. Anyway, it's an honor for me to join this long, distinguished list of past lecturers here. I believe I'm the first Secretary of Homeland Security to do so. Formed by Congress in 2002 in the wake of 9/11, the Department of Homeland Security is the third largest department of the United States government. It has a total annual spending authority of about $60 billion, 225,000 people, and 22 components. I find it interesting in my introductions around the country, people find it more remarkable that I used to lead 10,000 lawyers as opposed to 225,000 people now. Our responsibilities include counterterrorism, border security, port security, aviation security, maritime security, cybersecurity, the administration and enforcement of our immigration laws, the detection of nuclear, chemical, and biological threats to our homeland, the protection of our critical infrastructure, the protection of our national leaders, and the response to natural disasters, such as floods, tornadoes, hurricanes, and earthquakes. DHS includes within it Customs and Border Protection, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Citizenship and Immigration Services, TSA, FEMA, the Federal Protective Service, the Secret Service, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, and the United States Coast Guard. In about 2 hours, I will participate, as you heard, in the groundbreaking ceremony here for our National Bio and Agro-defense facility, which will help protect our nation's food supply and public health. We have many missions in the Department of Homeland Security, but they all fall within our broader overarching mission, the protection of our homeland. In my view, counterterrorism must remain the cornerstone of our department's overall Homeland Security mission. It's the reason the department was created by Congress in the wake of 9/11. Also, I'm a New Yorker, and I was present on Manhattan Island on September 11th, which happens to also be my birthday. I am therefore an eyewitness to an act of terrorism that can shatter a beautiful and ordinary workday in an instant and cause what was up till then unimaginable horror and tragedy. Out of that day, the Department of Homeland Security was born, and my personal commitment to the mission of Homeland Security was born. Today, almost 14 years after 9/11, it is still a dangerous world, and there is a new reality to the global terrorist threat. I'd like to discuss that new reality today and what we are doing about it. Not that long ago, the terrorist threat to the United States from al-Qaeda was trained and directed overseas and exported to our homeland. The 9/11 hijackers were acting on orders from al-Qaeda's external operations chief, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who was in turn carrying out the direction of Osama bin Laden. Likewise, the attempted shoe bomber in December 2001, the attempted underwear bomber in December 2009, the attempted Times Square car bombing in May 2010, and the attempted package bomb plot in October 2010 were all efforts to export terrorism to the United States, and they all appear to have been directed by a terrorist organization overseas. The response to these types of attacks and attempted attacks on our homeland was and is to take the fight directly to the terrorist organizations at locations overseas. And as a result of these operations, many of the leaders of al-Qaeda are now dead or captured. Osama bin Laden is dead. Anwar al-Awlaki, one of the leaders of al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, is dead. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed awaits trial before a military commission. But the new reality is that the global terrorist threat is more decentralized, more complex, and in many respects, harder to detect. The new reality involves the potential for smaller-scale attacks by those who are either homegrown or home-based, not exported, and who are inspired by, not necessarily directed by, a terrorist organization. Today, it is no longer necessary for terrorist organizations to personally recruit, train, and direct operatives overseas and in secret, and export them to the U.S. to commit a terrorist attack. Today, with new and skilled use of the Internet, terrorist organizations may publicly recruit and inspire individuals to conduct attacks within their own homelands. Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula no longer builds bombs in secret. It publicizes its instruction manual in its magazine and publicly urges people to use it. Today, we are also concerned about the so-called foreign fighter, those who are answering public calls to leave their home countries in Europe and elsewhere to travel to Iraq and Syria and take up the extremist fight there. Many of these individuals will seek to return to their home countries with the same extremist motive. The recent wave of terrorist attacks and attempted attacks here and in Europe reflect this new reality. The Boston Marathon bombing in April 2013, the attack on the War Memorial and the Parliament building in Ottawa in October 2014, the attack on the Charlie Hebdo headquarters in Paris in January 2015, and the attempted terrorist attack in Garland City, Texas in May 2015. What do these recent wave of attacks and attempted attacks have in common? They were all conducted by homegrown or home-based actors, and they all appear to have been inspired but not directed by al-Qaeda or ISIL. So what are we doing about it? First, we continue to take the fight to terrorist organizations overseas. ISIL is the terrorist organization most prominent on the world stage now. Since last September, our airstrikes and special operations have in fact led to the death of a number of ISIL's leaders. As President Obama indicated the other day, though there are tactical setbacks from time to time, We know that through sustained continued support of the Iraqi government and its security forces, and with the international coalition, we will degrade and ultimately destroy ISIL. We also continue counterterrorism operations against al-Qaeda targets in Yemen and elsewhere. We will continue to hunt for and take the fight directly to the terrorist organizations who threaten the United States at the places where they hide, where they plan, and where they train. Our intelligence community, particularly since 9/11, will continue to detect terrorist plots overseas at their earliest stages. Much of the terrorist threat continues to evolve around aviation security. We continuously evaluate, modify, and enhance our aviation security measures to stay one step ahead of what we believe the bad guys may be plotting. Last summer, for example, I directed enhanced screening at select overseas airports with direct flights to the United States. Weeks later, we added other airports. The United Kingdom, and other countries followed suit with similar enhancements. In January, TSA also increased random searches of passengers and carry-on luggage at U.S. airports. Last month, I directed enhancements to close certain vulnerabilities in airport security around the nation. We are building more pre-clearance operations at foreign airports with direct flights into the United States. This means deploying our customs officials overseas to screen passengers bound for the U.S. at the front end of a flight before they arrive in the United States. We now have 15 pre-clearance operations, and we are building more. The most recent pre-clearance operation was set up early last year in Abu Dhabi. Since that time, in Abu Dhabi alone, we have already screened more than 500,000 passengers and crew bound for the United States and have denied boarding to 785 individuals, including a number who were found in the terrorist screening database. Since 9/11, the Department of Homeland Security has become much more sophisticated at identifying individuals of suspicion who seek to travel to the United States. We continue to strengthen these systems with our own law enforcement and intelligence community and with our friends and allies overseas. At present, there are 38 countries for which we do not require a visa from its tourist travelers who seek to come to the United States. Our visa waiver program is a valuable tool for international commerce and travel. It must continue in a secure manner. Thus, we have determined that there are security enhancements that can be made to that program. Last year, DHS added more data fields to the electronic system for travel authorization, known as ESTA, to learn more key biographic information about travelers from visa waiver countries before they board an aircraft bound for the United States. Already, we have seen that these changes are providing added benefits to our security. We have identified a number of other security enhancements that can be made to the visa waiver program, which I expect to announce soon. The goal is to know more about those who travel to the United States and to conduct even more effective security screening. We are encouraging countries in the visa waiver program to engage in more effective security and law enforcement cooperation with the United States. DHS is sharing our aviation screening expertise with our allies to help them identify illicit travel while also protecting the privacy and civil liberties of all travelers. 2 days from now, I will represent the United States at an unprecedented session of the United Nations Security Council, along with my foreign counterparts represented on the Security Council, to discuss the problem of foreign fighters. We will track progress since the passage of UN Security Council Resolution 2178 on foreign fighters last September, and in general, discuss how we can do a better job individually and collectively to track and prevent foreign fighters. The FBI continues to identify, investigate, interdict, and help the Department of Justice prosecute attempted terrorist plots to the homeland. With the help of DHS, the FBI has also made a number of arrests of those who attempt to become foreign fighters before they can get on an airplane and leave our country. In reaction to terrorist groups' public calls for attacks on government installations in the West, and following the attack last fall in Ottawa, I directed that our Federal Protective Service enhance its security and presence at federal office buildings around the country. This enhanced security remains in place. In reaction to terrorist public calls for attacks on U.S. military installations and personnel, the Department of Defense has enhanced its security at bases in the United States. Given the new reality of the global terrorist threat, which involves the potential for small-scale homegrown attacks by those who could strike with little or no notice, we are working in closer collaboration with state and local law enforcement. Given the nature of the evolving threat, the local cop on the beat may actually be the first to detect a terrorist attack on the homeland. So, as often as several times a week, the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI share terrorist threat information and intelligence with joint terrorism task forces, state fusion centers, and local police chiefs and sheriffs. Several weeks ago, FBI Director Comey and I personally participated in a conference call with over 1,000 officers, officials of federal, state, and local law enforcement to personally communicate what we are seeing. With the FBI, DHS routinely prepares and releases written Joint Intelligence Bulletins, or JIBs, that's the acronym, to inform state and local law enforcement about potential threats to the homeland. Prior to the attempted attack at Garland, we issued a JIB about the risk of an attack there, given the nature of the exhibit. Fortunately, federal and local law enforcement were there, alert and prepared. Last September, DHS released a guide to help retail businesses identify suspicious purchases of explosive precursors. We're promoting mobile phone applications to support local law enforcement and first responders. Our DHS Office of Infrastructure Protection, together with the FBI and the National Counterterrorism Center, are engaged in a multi-city campaign with commercial businesses to review and enhance their security plans. Next, given the evolving nature of the homegrown terrorist threat, I and other government officials have engaged in community outreach to counter violent extremism here at home. In my view, this is indispensable to our Homeland Security efforts. We must reach communities that themselves have the ability to reach those individuals who may succumb to the slick internet appeal of ISIL and turn to violence. So in 2014 alone, DHS held over 70 meetings, roundtables, and other events in 14 cities. I personally participated in these meetings. Since becoming secretary, I have met with community leaders in Chicago, Columbus, Minneapolis, Los Angeles, Boston, New York, and Brooklyn. In a few weeks, I'll travel to Houston for the same purpose. The new reality is that our Homeland Security efforts must involve the public at large, too. In government, we're often afraid to ask the public for help. But we do need your help. At the Super Bowl earlier this year, we refashioned our If You See Something, Say Something campaign with a new look. This must be more than a slogan. We also need the help of Congress. We need a partner in Congress. 3 months ago, frankly, it was counterproductive and unnecessary for the Congress to bring the 225,000-person Department of Homeland Security to the brink of government shutdown while failing to enact a full-year appropriation for Homeland Security until 5 months into the fiscal year. It is alarming, and I'm sure Senator Roberts would agree with me, that just 4.5 days from now, the legal authorization for activities critical to national security, law enforcement, and public safety will expire, and Congress has failed to enact anything in its place. On May 13th, the House passed the USA Freedom Act by a strong bipartisan margin of 338 to 88. The USA Freedom Act is a good bill. It strikes the right balance between civil liberties and national security. It prohibits the controversial practice of bulk data collection and maintains authorities for more targeted collection activities. But the Senate has failed to pass this reasonable compromise or any other legislation in place of the authorities that are about to expire at midnight on Sunday. The Senate, I hope, will act soon. Doing nothing, as I'm sure Senator Roberts would agree with me, is not a responsible option. Finally, it is distressing that Congress has failed to repeal sequestration. 4 years ago, both Republicans and Democrats bet they could force compromise on taxes and spending by threatening themselves with a draconian slash-and-burn $1.2 trillion spending cut that would automatically kick in over a decade if Congress failed to act. But Congress failed to act, and sequestration became the budget law of the land in 2011. In 2013, the Murray-Ryan budget deal gave us a reprieve from sequestration for 2 years, but it is scheduled to return again at the end of this fiscal year unless Congress acts to repeal it. Unless sequestration is repealed, Homeland Security funding will return to its lowest level, adjusted for inflation, in a decade. Sequestration is not smart government budget making. Sequestration was meant to be draconian and so ugly that Congress would do the right thing to prevent it. The Department of Homeland Security's proposed budget for fiscal year 2016 is $41.2 billion, which is $1.5 billion more than our current appropriations. This is a good budget request, which has been well received by members of Congress on both sides of the aisle. Sequestration would cut the department's spending power by nearly $1.9 billion and could force the department to cut frontline personnel, technology, grants to state and local governments, and infrastructure investment. Sequestration would mean halting our investment in new border security surveillance and equipment. Sequestration could mean that the Secret Service will lose $236 million, or 12% of its budget, at a time when it needs to upgrade security at the White House, hire more agents, and protect the 2016 candidates for president. Sequestration could mean that FEMA will see its pre-disaster mitigation grants reduced by $175 million, an 88% decrease to the program. This is money used to support faster recovery time from disasters and build more levees, strengthen levees, boardwalks, hospitals, and schools. Plain and simple, sequestration weakens our Homeland Security, and it makes no sense. Like President Obama and many of our Democratic and Republican congressional leaders, I urge Congress to repeal sequestration. One last point, which I repeat often. We know that in a free society, Homeland Security means striking a balance between basic physical security and our values as a nation of people who enjoy the freedom to travel and associate, cherish privacy, celebrate our diversity, and are not afraid. Terrorism cannot prevail if the people refuse to be terrorized. In the final analysis, these are the things that constitute our greatest Homeland Security and our greatest strength as a nation. Thank you for listening to me.
Secretary Johnson will answer some questions, and we would like to ask people to please come to the microphone, ask your question, and please return to your seat. We'll have time for about 10 minutes of questions, and then he's got an obligation that we need to give him some time to do. So, Brett.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for coming to Kansas State University and giving such an inspiring talk. My name is Brett Powell. I'm in the physics department here at K-State. As you clearly understand, the fight against terrorism and the security of the United States is more and more technological every year. And I'm sure the technology-savvy folks in DHS are among the best in the world. But my question concerns...
There he is right there, our Undersecretary for Science and Technology.
There you go.
Brothers.
But my...
He is, as they say, the brains of the outfit.
Okay. My question, though, concerns the many analysts you have the outstanding analysts you have, but whose training is not in technology. I mean, the folks who have degrees and specialties in political science and economics and sociology, et cetera, that are so invaluable to you as analysts. Are they getting any kind of background information, some technology training, not just computers, but the whole breadth of things in terms of technology training? Is something like this available to these folks, these outstanding analysts who could maybe do even more if they were aware and understood some of the technology going on?
Well, speaking just in terms of within our Homeland Security community, one of Dr. Brothers' jobs is to make sure that our personnel have available to them and are trained in the latest, best science and technology. In general, we are moving toward what we refer to as a risk-based strategy to Homeland Security. The most prominent example of a risk-based strategy to Homeland Security is what you see every time you go to an airport, and those of you who are signed up for TSA PreCheck. How many of you are signed up for TSA PreCheck in this room? Okay, TSA PreCheck is a process by which if you submit to a background check, you get to, and we know something about you before you get on the plane, before you get to the airport, then you get to go to the shorter line. So it enables us to focus our technology and resources on the larger population of people that we know less about at the airports, and they're screened appropriately. Similar approach with border security, our land borders. Through advances in science and technology, surveillance equipment, we are able to detect where the migration patterns are occurring, and they do occur, and they do ebb and flow, and they do very often concentrate in particular areas on the southern border in particular. And so we're able to focus our resources on that. And that is considered a risk-based approach, which involves very much so the latest and best science and technology. My predecessor used to say, I can build a 15-foot wall across the entire border, but somebody will then build a 16-foot ladder. So through science and technology, we're able to focus our efforts where we see the threat resides, and that's the direction we want to move in. Yes, sir.
Good morning. I am Abdul Hadi from Saudi Arabia, dual majoring in political science and economics here at Kansas State University. Well, first of all, thank you for the people before you and your position for making all the progress in Homeland Security. 10 years ago, I came to the United States. I was stuck for 10 hours when I was trying to enter the U.S. From New York. Today, it would take me less than an hour. So thank you for that. Second of all, I've been reading and involved in the aftermath of events, of the horrible, tragic 9/11 event. And in 2006, Russian KGB, former KGB, FSB spy in London was killed by the Russian agency because he revealed very, very secret information, and I don't know how that plays into effect and how the relationship between the United States and Russia in today's plays, and which is that Russia literally trained Anwar al-Zawahiri one-on-one right before 9/11 on the events of 9/11. That doesn't change the enemy. That doesn't change that Al-Qaeda is one of our main enemy. It doesn't change that because of Al-Qaeda and because of other things we have ISIS. But how does this change the relationship or the intelligence that we have about Al-Qaeda and about Russia and those complicated issues?
Well, let me answer your question this way. As I indicated in my prepared remarks, it is becoming a more complicated world. The terrorist threat is becoming more decentralized. In my judgment, our intelligence community has come a long way in its ability to, as I indicated, detect terrorist plotting to our homeland from overseas. We have come a long way in that regard, in connecting the dots, so to speak. One of the challenges that we face is, and I've said this before, this is not new coming from me, is the challenge of the demands of the marketplace in general for more and more encryption in our communications, deeper and deeper encryption in how the average honest citizen communicates. It's a demand of the marketplace. We want more cybersecurity. The problem with that is that it is also making it harder to detect crime, and it's making it harder to detect potential terrorist planning. And so I and the FBI director and others we've been trying to broach this subject in Silicon Valley, with people in the internet world, to say, you know, you've responded to the demands of the marketplace, that's good, but we need some sort of appropriate balanced solution that also enables law enforcement, national security to better detect communications that involve crime, that involve potential terrorist activity. And this is not just a federal government issue. I hear a lot from state and local law enforcement, from district attorneys, about the problems they are having with more and more encryption. Any crime that involves a communication requires the ability to monitor that communication in the appropriate circumstances when there is cause to believe that it reflects criminal activity. And so that is a new dynamic also to the situation we face in Homeland Security now, and I'm hoping that working with people in the private sector, we can find the appropriate balanced solution that takes account of the privacy, the civil liberties of our citizens, the cybersecurity of American businesses, but also takes account of the law enforcement, national security, Homeland Security needs. Yes, yes, sir. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Tim Weddle, and I have a question about what you just referenced there. You spoke a lot about the balance between the freedom and the civil liberties as well as security. And in your response to the first question, you also mentioned the south border, which is kind of personal relevance to me, just a product of the modern language department here at Kansas State. And so there's also seems to be a humanitarian and ethical balance as well. My question for you is, as a leader of the DHS, are there guiding principles, or is there one guiding principle that you use to determine the right balance? Thanks.
Good question. I used to work in the Department of Defense. I used to be the general counsel for the Department of Defense for 4 years. And one thing that is different about DHS, that is unique to DHS, I believe, We have an Office of Civil Rights, Civil Liberties, and we have an Office of Privacy that reports directly to me. And those two senior officials very much have a seat at my table when we talk about Homeland Security, national security issues, to ensure that I and others are getting that perspective when we consider an enhancement, let's say, to aviation security or border security or Homeland Security in general. And very often when we see the latest piece of intelligence or the latest threat stream, the first reaction is, frankly, to overreact, to say, oh, we've got to shut that down. We've got to screen everybody for everything. And I like to tell audiences that I could achieve a perfectly safe commercial air flight, but nobody'd be wearing any clothes, nobody'd have any food, nobody'd be allowed to get up and go to the bathroom. You'd stay strapped in your seat, and it'd be a perfectly safe flight. But I don't think many of you in this room would want to experience that flight, not even from here to Kansas City. And so that's what I mean when I say Homeland Security is a balance. I could build a perfectly safe city, but it's going to be a prison. And so we have to balance aviation security, Homeland Security, port security, with the things that in a free democratic society our people cherish and enjoy, that make our country great. And so that means the freedom to travel, the freedom to associate, privacy, free speech, and other things. And I don't want to be the Homeland Security official that presides over a country where everyone becomes suspicious of everybody else, where everyone becomes suspicious of people who don't look like them, who are of a different religion, of a different skin color. That's not who we are as Americans. And so I think it is not an accident that the year after the Boston Marathon bombing, the number of runners who signed up went from 27,000 to 36,000. More people signed up for the race the year after the bombing because we as Americans want to demonstrate that we're not afraid. We're not going to run and hide from things like this. And so I want to preserve and encourage that type of thing as much as possible in our country. I really meant it when I said that terrorism cannot prevail if the people refuse to be terrorized. And that's who we are in this country. And I think that is part and parcel of our Homeland Security. So,
I apologize.
Yes,
I'm going to have to do this to you, but we need to finish off, and please join me.
One more question.
Okay.
One more question.
Okay, there you go. Okay.
I always regret the one more question.
Thank you, Secretary.
It's usually your reporter.
And I will get it with the president.
You're not a reporter, are you? It's usually a reporter. Okay. All right.
Go ahead.
My name is Mohammed Al-Hamdi. I'm from the Economics Department here at K-State. I just wanted to bring your attention to a few things at the Department of Homeland Security. As a naturalized citizen, if you go through the process, you can see there are something does not make sense in the forms. I give you an example. In the form asks you, between the year 1933 to 1945, were you a member of the Nazi party or something like that? It does not make sense today. It made sense in the 1960s. I brought this as an example. If you look at the security clearance applications, which is now available online to do, so many questions, they are American-based, which makes sense, perfect sense for an American coming from this society. But the Homeland Security also works with so many foreigners, naturalized citizens, which many of those questions and articulations do not make any sense for them. And they struggle from that. And that's why we see, as naturalized citizens, are holes in the system that some people go through it and they cannot be detected. And that's why you see some people are brought from overseas here as refugees and then later appear to be having connections to some terrorist group. So I wanted to bring your attention to that if you can review that.
I'm very tempted, thank you for that question.
Thank you.
I'm very tempted to say, write your senator. Because a lot of what we ask is driven by law and legal requirements. For example, when I administer the oath to naturalized citizens, I'm required by law to administer a very specific oath with very specific words, requiring people to renounce their potentate. So a lot of what we ask is driven by law, but I also agree that from time to time we need to evaluate, given how the world situation evolves, some of the security questions that we ask to the extent that we can. I've been through, not naturalization, but enough security clearances in my time to ask, why do we still need to ask that question? And from time to time, we do need to relook at those things. So thank you all very, very much. Thank you for listening to me. I really appreciated the opportunity to come to Kansas State and to speak to you all. Have a good day and have a good summer.